I heard the bell, so it must be time. I'll call this meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge and remain standing. Thank you. Please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you so much. Roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Dickey.
Here.
Vice Mayor Fidel. Present. Councilmember McMahon. Here. Councilmember Charno. Here. Councilmember Magazine. Okay. Councilmember Spellich is on an excused absence. Councilmember Grzybowski.
Present.
Thank you very much. Our first item are our reports by the town manager and council members. Grady?
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor and Council. I just have a couple announcements. First one, I wanted to remind the community that this Saturday is a big a deal that we've got going on. It's the Make a Difference Day. We've held this event every year for the last several years. There are about 40 projects that have been identified to help community come together and help their neighbors with projects that they have around the home. And there's going to be a lot of landscaping efforts and home improvement type of work that's going to be done. And over 200 volunteers actually participate with that. Also, I wanted to let you know, and I'm going to make this announcement at the November 1st meeting as well, but the town will be hosting an open house at the community center on November 9th from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. to allow comment from residents on the sidewalk gap elimination project, which is on Saguaro, which is a sidewalk project on Saguaro Boulevard between Fountain Hills Boulevard and Colony Drive, and Palisades between Fountain Hills Boulevard and Saguaro. This is a project that is approximately 94% funded by the federal government, and this grant covers the design and construction costs. So we really look forward to seeing the public show up there and give their input before this project commences. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I wanted to remind that we have a CARES Forum this Thursday night at 6:30 at the Community Center, and everybody is welcome to attend. We are going to have a session on veterans with the director, Arizona Director of Veterans Affairs here, and we are going to be speaking in depth about the services that are available to veterans, because many of them don't know that they are available, and there are many available. Also, we had a committee meeting on our dementia friendly. The town is currently in the process of applying to become a dementia friendly town and have additional services available for our citizens. And also, Mayor Dickey and I had a nice time. We were with East Valley Partnership. We were invited to attend a viewing of the new hockey rink at the college, and it is going to be where the Coyotes are going to be playing for a while. So it was cold, but it's a really nice facility.
Just two quick things, Mayor. Thank you. I'm looking forward to being on Grady's work team again for the MAD Day. So we had a good time last year. We worked hard, though, and I have a feeling we'll be working even harder this year, from what I understand. And then we had the privilege of attending the Falcons home football game last week, and they won handily, and it was a great time. And there was a pretty good crowd out there, too. So one home game left, so let's make sure we get out there and support them.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I think all of us had the privilege of attending a truly celebratory event last week at the community center. We're honoring the Community Services Department for their huge national first place honor. So that was a fun event, and thank everybody for putting that together. And a couple of us from the Drug Prevention Coalition, we went on a tour of the Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation. Was organized by the River of Time Museum and Exploration Center, I think it's called now. But it was a really good tour, and Clisine Lewis, their cultural coordinator over there, kind of led the tour and saw a lot of sights and learned a lot of the history of Fort McDowell and the Yavapai people. So that was a very good thing. So it encouraged the museum's going to have several more of those tours. So I would encourage anyone to take that if you can. It's very interesting.
Okay, I guess I'm next since there's 2 empty seats between us. I was going to mention the gold medal award that community services held at the community center as well, so I'm glad Councilman Charno did. You guys missed a great day. They did a really good job. We're so proud of them. I was also going to mention Make a Difference Day planning meeting and the reminder about Make a Difference Day coming up this Saturday. So instead of doing all that stuff, I want to say I love Stellar Student Day. I love to see this many people, 1, and 2, I love to see this many young people. And if you guys aren't actually told, you can stay for the whole meeting. You don't have to leave. It is kind of cool, and it does show you the blue hairs can actually make town council seats. Thank you.
I don't know how to take that blue hair thing. Usually it means a little something different.
Or no hairs.
Well, true. So I was able to go to my first Arizona Mayor's Education Roundtable discussion. That one was about chronic absenteeism. Other meetings and discussions that'll be coming involve economic impact of post-secondary education, regional talent development, and early childhood education and care. The group is made up there of mayors, superintendents, West Ed, Helios, Collaborative Communications, Education Forward Arizona, and others, and they recognize the benefits of cities and schools working together for their shared communities. When one excels, we all succeed, and that's the Fountain Hills way. And Peggy mentioned that we got to go on our East Valley tour of the Novus Innovation Corridor in Tempe, in the ASU Mullet Theater Arena. It represents a very large investment and in residential and hospitality and restaurants, retails and offices, and this is very encouraging for the whole region when we see someone have that kind of, I guess you would say, optimism in the future. So a very big investment. Butterfly Flutter, their kind of reveal was this weekend, and with all that rain, they had everything inside, and it worked out really well down by the fountain, and they were beautiful. I go to a lot of ribbon cuttings, but I have to say I really liked the Tap House one. I don't know why, but that was really fun. And Grady and I, we Zoomed with the FAA, and they had met with Fort McDowell, Yavapai Nation. They're going to be changing some of the flight paths, but it's at least a year away. It shouldn't affect our town, but we'll have a lot of opportunities for public involvement. And then while we had them, we took advantage of the ability to talk to them about some of the helicopters and the low-flying early in the morning flights sometimes that our neighbors are hearing and a little upset about. So it was a really good meeting, and I think we got some good resources to tell some folks on where they might get some relief. And last, again, as we approach Veterans Day, we'll talk more about it at the next meeting, but our Fountain Hills Cares at 6:30, which is all about veterans. I heard that we were getting some criticism about our Fountain Hills Cares events, our programs. They've addressed, as Peggy mentioned, dementia, substance abuse, and I find it hard to understand why sharing this important information with our individuals and our families and our community would be shamed at all. So I really hope that we get a good turnout. I encourage people to come and learn about the resources that are available for our veterans and their families. And again, that's Thursday at 6:30 at the Community Center. Thank you very much. Any other items? I think Alan is not on the phone, correct? Okay. If you're there, Alan, let me know. So if you have anything. Our next item is our Stellar Student Awards for the month. And I will start, as usual, with the kids from McDowell Mountain. So what I do is I read the names, I read the little blurbs about you. You come up, Angela will give you the certificate, and then we'll come down and Bob from the newspaper will take a picture. Our first student is Javi Arellano Casillas. Yay! Javi You can't tell it by looking at his face, but he's a serious student, a serious and dedicated student in music class, and he remains focused and participates in every music activity to the fullest. He did an amazing job composing an original piece of music with body percussion for the instruments. The excitement on his face when he was composing this music was priceless. Everyone could see that he was really into the task. He was really proud of these results. Javi's always respectful of his teacher and his classmates, shows a willingness to practice, to learn something new. He's a stellar student, role model for his peers, and he has every reason to be proud of himself. Javi. Woo! Our next McDowell Mountain student is Raleigh Cruz Wood. Raleigh? Yay. Am I saying that right, Raleigh? She is a wonderful student role model for her classmates in music. She always does her best, and she fully engages herself in all learning activities, including learning how to play the ukulele. And in 1 week, she learned how to play You Are My Sunshine. Raleigh is always respectful and kind to her teacher and classmates. She energizes the classroom with her positive attitude and broad smile on her face. Raleigh shows determination and focus in music class, and those attributes help her learn how to play instruments well. She is truly a stellar student. Raleigh. Now we move up to the Fountain Hills Middle School, and our student is Sarah Forstall. Sarah, are you here? All right. Being positive, helpful, cooperative, and friendly are all the traits of a good student. This is Sarah Forstall. She excels in all subjects and has a true enthusiasm and gift for math. Her hard work and efforts are reflected in her high grades. She's a model student, always follows our school PBIS, Positive Behavioral Interventions, and supports expectations. We are very proud of our 5th grade Falcon, Sarah. Next is Harrison Courier. Harrison, are you here? Yay, come on up. When we think of Harrison Courier, we think of him as a student that always leads by example. When working in groups on a project, he motivates and inspires his peers to stay on task and produce the team's personal best. As a student leader, Harrison always demonstrates our school's PBIS expectations on being respectful, responsible, safe, and kind. Way to go, Harrison. Now we move to the high school. Haley Chandler. Haley? Hey. Haley is very helpful around campus. She's a joy to have in class and never hesitates to assist her peers. She's always on task and is very respectful. Having her be part of this campus brings great value to this school because of the type of leader she is. Haley's a great role model. Seeing her influence around campus makes me extremely hopeful of what her future holds. She's a junior who has completed 30-plus hours of community service, 2+ years of varsity sports, and maintains a 3.0 or higher. That is Haley Chandler. And our last student for this month is Luke Blodell. Blodell? Luke, are you here? Oh, there you go. Luke is always humble and is selfless, always very interactive. Every interaction I've had with him has been nothing but pleasant. You can find him at any school event, in the student section, leading cheers and showing his school spirit. He represents being a Falcon and is proud to be one every day. Seeing his enthusiasm daily and his will to succeed has been a wonderful thing to watch, and I can't wait to see the great things he accomplishes. Luke is a senior who's completed 40-plus hours of community service, leadership role in Stugo, 2+ years of varsity sports while maintaining a GPA of 3.0 or higher. Luke. Okay, smile nice. All right, thank you all. See you later. Good to see you. Thank you so much. You don't have to leave, but you can. Have a good night. So great. Our next item is a proclamation. It's for Red Ribbon Week. Councilman Mike Charno is going to do the honors, and he will present to some people from the coalition. I think Sean Uphoff is here, and I also want to mention that I believe Jackie Needham from the East Valley Young Marines is in attendance to listen to this important message. So if Sean would like to come up and accept this, and Mike will read it.
Tammy, why don't you come up too? Tammy Bell, I know you weren't expecting it, but Tammy Bell is on our board of directors for the Drug Prevention Coalition. So here's the proclamation. So whereas alcohol and drug abuse affect individuals, families, and communities across the nation, and whereas it's imperative that visible, unified efforts by community members be launched to prevent drug abuse, and whereas Red Ribbon Week offers citizens the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to drug-free lifestyles, and whereas Red Ribbon Week will be celebrated in communities across the nation on October 23rd through the 31st, and whereas businesses, government, law enforcement, media, healthcare providers, religious institutions, schools, and other community-based organizations will demonstrate their commitment to healthy, drug-free lifestyles by wearing red ribbons and participating in drug prevention activities. And whereas Community of Fountain Hills further commits its resources to ensure the success of Red Ribbon Week, and the Fountain Hills Drug Prevention Coalition invites all residents to attend a drug prevention health fair at the Fountain Hills Middle School on next Friday morning, October 28th, between 9 and 11 a.m. So now therefore be resolved, on behalf of Ginny Dickey, Mayor of the Town of Fountain Hills, we do hereby proclaim October 23rd, 3rd to 31st as Red Ribbon Week, and encourage you to participate in drug prevention education activities not only during Red Ribbon Week, but also throughout the year, making a visible statement that we are strongly committed to a drug-free lifestyle. So that's a proclamation. Might have to shorten it up next time, I tell you. But anyway, so again, just want to invite everyone out next Friday, 9 to 11 at the middle school. And we're going to have a lot of activities at this health fair. So we'll, I don't know, you grabbing a picture now?
Mike, maybe the youngsters can come up
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I want to honor the young Marines as well. I think they're out of Mesa, and it's always good to see young people involved in activities, and I know they've been big supporters of Red Ribbon throughout the years as well, so welcome, everybody. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming. Our next item is a presentation by our Citizens Streets Committee. Grady?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. As you're aware, the Citizen Streets Committee was formed last year for the purpose of developing recommendations relating to this town's long-term streets needs. We're very fortunate to have a very active group here that's been very good about analyzing the situation we have. And so tonight, there is an interim report that will be given by Jerry Butler. Jerry Butler, if you can come up to the podium. Jerry is standing in. Originally, Mark Graham, who had given you the last presentation, was going to do it, but Jerry's actually more than qualified. He's actually done a lot of the analysis that you'll be seeing tonight. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Butler, who is also a Fountain Hills Sanitary District board member, and is here probably also for the other item that's on the agenda as well. Mr. Butler?
Thank you, Grady. Mayor, Council, thank you for allowing us to come and make another presentation. On your agenda, it does say that we are going to talk to you about the street conditions from 2017 and 2022. So sit back, relax. We'll start with 2017. No, only kidding. We boiled it down to something a lot less than that notebook, but the notebook does represent a lot of the things that we have been addressing since we were here five and a half months ago. As far as the background, yes, as Grady said, we were formed a little over a year ago. We have been working diligently to understand the complications, the complexities of our street system, and to come up with the funding recommendations that the community can accept. Since our last update, as your agenda said, we have gone through a very detailed comparison of 2017 pavement conditions, along with, and I need to emphasize the word estimated 2022 conditions, because that's all we can do in a 5-year gap. The pavement conditions that we have been analyzing, we created a spreadsheet that began with the data that was accumulated in 2017. And that included 1,445 segments of our street system. A street segment is maybe from intersection to intersection or from an intersection to a major alley. But anyway, there's nearly 1,500 segments that we've taken a look at. There's 3.6 million square yards of pavement. Think about that. That's a lot of asphalt. In trying to make it easier to understand, we have categorized the streets into letter grades. And when you were in school, A, B, C, D, and F did mean something. In our case, C is not that good. But we had in our spreadsheet, an example is just shown in the lower right-hand corner of the exhibit here, is that spreadsheet goes for 45 more columns to the right. There's 30,000 entries in this spreadsheet. We've tried to take a look at each year between now and 2027 to see what a 5-year improvement plan might look like. We've adjusted all of our analyses based on the work that the town has already accomplished. So this is not just totally 2017 conditions. We've tried to bring it up to what we believe are 2023 conditions, or 2022 conditions. To help you understand what our streets do go through, this might get a little busy, but I'm an engineer and you'll have to bear with me. So what is A, B, C, D, and F as it relates to our streets? If you look at the left side of this chart, you'll see that the condition index goes from 0 to 100. Obviously, 100 is the best you can get in a street. Even after Saguaro was reconstructed and testing followed about a year later, many of the segments were in the high 90s. Nothing got to 100. So it's almost impossible to be there. So it's just a level to understand what streets are like. A, in this case, is from 100 down to an 85 rating. And as you can see, they continue to vary until you get down to F, which is at a rating of 40. As you look at this chart, I'd like to call your attention to the line at 70. If you can see the degradation curves here, and you notice that there are many variations because, as in those of us who lived in cold climates, no two snowflakes are alike, and no two streets are alike in Fountain Hills. They all vary, they all deteriorate differently. But this chart has 6 variations created by IMS in 2017. Please look at below 70 how steep the curve gets. It's an indication that once you cross over or through that threshold, streets deteriorated much more quickly than they did when they were new. And if we don't keep up with them, the deterioration accelerates. A is often thought of as being excellent, as you can imagine. B is very good. C is, it's good, okay. D is fair, and F is where we want to, we don't want to go there. It's poor to failing conditions. I want to call your attention for just a moment between 70 and 40. To go from a really very good street in B to an F, in some cases, might take only 10 years. So again, if we don't stay up with the maintenance and the repairs, we're in trouble. So as we go forward with some additional slides, please focus on the D and F grades that I'm about ready to show you. In this chart, it represents the arterial street system, which examples are Shea, Saguaro, Palisades. There are two others, but it's the streets that most of us use most of the time. They're streets that are most traveled. Oftentimes, they're the 4-lane streets in our community. The blue is representative of what conditions were in 2017 by letter grade, and also what we have estimated to be in 2022. And as you can see on the first A rating, the streets have gone down a little bit. But again, if you focus on the far right side, D and F, in 2017, those two combined were a little over 14%. In 2022, we estimate that they may have increased to a little over 21%. And from an engineering point of view, that's about a 50% increase. On the next slide, we have identified collectors, which includes streets like Kingstree, El Lago, Golden Eagle. These are streets that connect the arterials together. These streets represent about 17% of our total street network. And again, when you look at D and F combined, in 2017, it was nearly 37%. In 2022, we estimate it might be closer to 45%, which is only a 22% increase, but 15% is now in the poor to failing category, the far right chart. Next, we'll move on to the local streets. And again, using the same background of information. In this category, there are 1,175 segments. There are approximately 2.3 million square yards on our local streets. It represents 63% of our network. And if you study A for just a moment, hey, we're doing okay. It's because a lot of the investments in the last 5 years have really gone to try to fix up local streets, because that's where the biggest complaints come from. Residents always want the street in front of my house fixed first. And the staff's been, I think, really trying to address those. But again, if you focus to the far right, D and F, it was 67% in 2017, and it decreased to 52% in 2022, which indicates, hey, we've been making some gains, but they're modest. Because look at the far right bar chart. It's 29% that we're estimating could be in the F category today. So what are we going to do? We, the committee, strongly recommend the approval of your agenda item 8G tonight in order to assess the pavement condition of all streets. They were previously done 5 years ago and 15 years ago. Management practices say that we really should be doing this every 5 to 7 years to eliminate some of the guesswork. And I go back to reemphasize, no two snowflakes are alike, so we can't say for sure how each street is deteriorating unless we test them more frequently. And this is going to help the committee determine, identify a long-range plan and costs that will be in everyone's mind on what will be our priorities to mill and overlay and reconstruct streets. And coming before you, or maybe it already has, is the $8 million in the American Rescue Plan Act coming from the federal government. I think it's $4 million each year for the next 2 years. We strongly urge you to invest that money in our streets. It will be a tremendous help going forward. So, what's next? Well, we intend to return to the council with our findings and final budgetary recommendations in the spring. We also, in the meantime, have to come up with a public outreach program on how we share all of this information in meaningful ways to the residents of Fountain Hills. My hope is that on this last bullet point, we'll be able to do that before the tests are completed, which will not happen until March. That's as early as a consultant could get around to looking at our streets. So there's a lot of things that we need to accomplish between now and then. One is the public outreach program. What I'd like to leave you with is a fourth to 1/3 of our streets, our street yardage, we believe is in failing condition. Now, it varies. I said a fourth to a third. The spreadsheets that were created, initially, we came up with about a third of the streets in DNF. Second analysis, maybe they're a fourth, but it depends on the sliding from D to F. Is a 41 in D category a D, or by the time we talk about it next year, will it be an F? So it just depends on how you position it. We've also concluded that the existing $2.5 million budget that the council spends on streets each year is totally insufficient. It's not enough to catch up with the problem. Personally, I'm optimistic that this committee can come up with a 5-year program that will fix all streets in such a condition that 5 years from now, the $2.5 million will be sufficient to continue proper maintenance and sustain our streets for a long, long time. And with that, I will close and try to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry, very much. Any questions? Yes, Vice Mayor?
Can you go back a couple slides to your last one that showed the, that one, the last one? So that 29.4%, do you know what that is in yards or miles?
Well, in yards, if you, there's 2.3 million square yards in this local street network. So I guess if you took 30% of 2.3 million, you'd have your answer.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, Councilmember Magazine is on the line.
Alan, did you have any questions for Jerry or the committee? It's not. Well, so,
Yes,
you
Madam Mayor.
don't get away from me. No, I'm very grateful for all the work that you and the committee have done, and partnering with our staff, which I know have been helping you along, and us too as partners. You know, I was remembering when we first started hearing about this years ago, and they made the metaphor about a family having a picnic on a beach, and everything was fine, but there was a tidal wave coming, but you couldn't tell by looking at it. And so I know that this backlog is the tidal wave. And I know that, and the recognition at the time was we should be looking at some of the roads that weren't in such bad condition because we were trying to stop this backlog, this kind of tipping point, eve of destruction sort of feel. But there is a level of frustration, obviously, from our citizens and from us, like, we want stuff now, but I believe that there is a logic to follow. That's why at our retreat, we decided we wanted to have a citizen committee. We wanted to really get to the bottom of the best way to move forward. I'm thankful that the council agreed. And it wasn't only the 8 million, which was, I think, this year and next year, but then we also had an extra 2 million the year before, and we all agreed that that should go towards streets. I think we put some aside for facility replacement, but maybe 1 million or so. But we agree that that was where that needed to go. I know there's an impression that we haven't been addressing streets, but this is the way to address them. In the meantime, while we were doing this, as you can see, we've been taking care of local streets. We obviously did Saguaro. We finished that project thanks to the folks who voted for that bond. We did all the area around here, and obviously I think Justin could, stand up and give us a log of all of the work that's happened over the last 3 years or so. But we knew many years ago 2.5 million wasn't enough. We've tried to put more in as we can year after year. And I think we, even way back then, we said we need another 3 or 4 million to add to the 2.5 million. Not forever, though, and you just said that. This is something that can get us on track so that we can get back to 2.5, 3 million a year that will prevent this. None of this is a surprise as far as overall, but to see it like this in very comprehensible way is really appreciated. And I know I look forward to the next steps, that we have the item on the agenda for tonight. Mike, it looks like you're gonna say something, so please have at it.
Well, I was going to let you finish if you had more to, but no, and I think to piggyback on that as well, it is good to point out that we have had a pavement management plan, and so for the last several years, we picked, I don't know if it was a number or a grade for like the average we wanted on all these different kinds of streets, and that was the goal. And I think it's also caused some consternation out there because as you know, Jerry, every street is different. So we had a ranking on all those thousands of stretches of roadway, and so we were doing some maintenance here, and the neighbor over here wasn't getting some, and then there was more work on the other side of town, and people were like, what the heck, they were right here. And so, on the surface, it didn't look, like it was planned, but there is a plan, and we were following it. And years ago, we tried the zone approach, and that wasn't working, and so then we shifted to this. So I just wanted to point that out, that, like you said, we're aware of this, we have been working on it, and, there's a lot of other needs in town as well. So we have a budget, and that's what we've been budgeting, and like you said, we knew, we needed more, and so, at some point in time, citizens are probably gonna have to step up and pay for some of it. That's the bottom line, one way or another.
Any other comments or questions?
I'd like to go back a slide if I could, because I
Sure.
think this is important for the public to understand. If we can keep the streets in the A and B letter grades, we can sustain those streets with what we would think of as ordinary, normal maintenance. Maintenance that might have to occur every 5, 6, or 7 years. Once you cross below the 70 threshold, we're now into a repair condition. And the other part of this chart that you could look at is costs are minimal at the top. And as you go down the chart, they get very, very expensive. So I think our community's objective would be to try to get all of our streets definitely out of F, hopefully out of D, and up into the A and B categories so that we can afford to maintain them the way that that residents probably expect streets to be maintained. And before I leave, I do want to compliment our staff, our street staff. They are doing a phenomenal job with very little resources. And if the public calls them to complain, I'm sorry, but they are doing the best that they can, and they're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry, very much. All right, thank you very much for that presentation. Our next item is call to the public. Are there any speaker cards?
Yes, Mayor, we have one. It's Barry Wolbolski. Did I say that right, Barry? Okay. Close.
I'm Barry Wolborski, and I'm a resident of Fountain Hills, and I'm a board member of the Sunridge Canyon Homeowners Association and treasurer of that organization. And I'm here to speak against the park in Sunridge Canyon that you're planning, and I've got a wonderful solution for you. Take the money for that park and put it in roads, because nobody wants the park. You know, we've had a lot of surveys done by Mr. Miller here. The first one was a survey that we got that asked us what we wanted in the park. The second one was a focus group of about 12 members of a 788 home community that presented all the good things they could do in that park. Is something missing here? Like, do you want the park? Nobody's asked us that. We'd really like somebody to ask us that, Grady.
I can't really talk about this because it's not on the agenda, but I do want to let you and other Sunridge residents know that in November, we're going to be having a public engagement process where the public can participate and give us your full feedback.
But is somebody
So-
going to do a survey and say, do you
We're
want
not
the
doing,
park?
we're
or
not doing surveys. You're going to be welcome to come to the meeting and provide your input and
So
feedback on
once
that.
again, it'll be a very small subset of people?
And Mayor and Council, I'm going to go ahead and advise that we hold any response until after the call of the public per Arizona statute. Thanks. No, it's okay.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I would like to see a survey that really represents the people in our community to see whether they want the park or not. I forgot to mention that we did have a meeting last summer that Grady attended via Zoom, where we had probably the largest board meeting of homeowners that we've ever had. We've had about well over 50 in terms of on Zoom and in person. We usually get about 7 or 8 at a board meeting. And it was extremely negative about the park. The area that they want to put it in is a very nice natural area with natural flora and fauna. It's a 5-acre lot. They can't do much with it except put in a few shelters and a few walking trails. It adds nothing to the neighborhood. No one has yet informed us what this is supposed to add to our neighborhood. We have 2 small parks already. We're the furthest house in our community is less than 1.5 miles from Golden Eagle Park, which is a wonderful and beautiful park that most of you know. Take this money and put it somewhere where you can use it. That's all I've got.
Do you have any other cards? I'm sorry.
Mayor, we don't have any more for call to the public.
Thank you very much. Our next item is our consent agenda. Unless anybody would like something removed, can I get a motion?
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Now we'll start with our regular agenda, which is recommendations for the appointment of members to the town boards, commissions, and committees. I have received recommendations, and I will offer the following for your approval to serve as noticed. Excuse me. All right. So we start with Community Services Advisory Commission. Shruti Petty for a term of 11/1/22 to 6/30/22. Yes. Next is our Historical and Cultural Advisory Commission. This is a new commission, so there'll be 7 members appointed, and their term will be decided by lot at their first meeting. The members are David Corlett, Susan Obst-Dworkis, Debbie Skehan, Diane Price, Jackie Miles, William Mead, and Sandy Ursini. Our next item is the Board of Adjustment, and we've got Eric Hansen and Nick Seaman, both for full terms, 11/1/22 to 10/31/25. Okay. Sister Cities Advisory, Nicholas Stump for full term. For McDowell Mountain Preservation Commission, Stephen Nerney for a full term. For SPAC Strategic Planning is Jill Keefe for a partial term, 11/1/22 to 4/30/24. And a vacancy to be filled at a future date will be a Sister Cities Advisory Commission appointment for a full term. Before we take a motion, I want to thank the applicants and the subcommittees on the council who did the interviews, and our staff, and I want to congratulate and thank those who will be serving on these commissions. Can I get a motion? It's on 222. Everybody's scrolling through. Huh?
Move to approve the council subcommittee recommendations for the appointment of members to the town's boards, commissions, and committees as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you very much for those who are willing to serve. We appreciate it. Okay, our next item is going to be about our short-term rental ordinance that we've been working on for quite a while. Grady?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you know, this has been an interesting subject. This past session, the legislature passed a law that gave us some minimal ways of regulating short-term rentals. Our own town attorney was part of a work group with the LIG on a model ordinance that was developed. I'm going to turn it over to John Wesley, our Development Services Director, who has a brief presentation. The purpose of tonight is really to review. No action is going to be required, but for the council to review, ask questions, and of course for the public, if they have any questions about this vacation rental ordinance, they can ask questions as well. Then after we kind of refine this and kind of get direction from you tonight, we'll come back at a later council meeting for your consideration of possible action. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wesley.
Mayor and Council, as Mr. Miller said, it's a brief presentation. That was maybe about half of it there already. That's fine. The agenda packet has in it draft language that could go into an ordinance based on what has been provided through the model committee. And so this is going to just kind of step through some of the highlights of that and set the stage then for discussion with the town attorney for more detail. But as Mr. Miller said, in 2016, the state legislature preempted our ability to control short-term rentals, and so we've been dealing with the impacts of that over the last 6 years. In this last session, they did pass some legislation that the governor signed that does now give us some opportunity to implement some local rules and regulations. And so that's what we have before you this evening is first take at that based on both the model ordinance, but also some work that was done in Paradise Valley with an ordinance that they approved that goes beyond some of the things in the state statute, but has withstood some legal challenge. So we've put some of those ideas also in the draft ordinance for your consideration. But starting with what's included in the model ordinance, with each of the sections, again, this is just what the section title is and what some of the basic ideas behind that section are. So in section 1, the purpose section defines the purpose of the...
You heard a bleep, so.
Councilman Allen? Allen, could you mute, please?
Yeah, I've been trying to talk, but nobody's been hearing me, so I'll just stop.
Well, now we can hear you. Please feel free to comment when you're ready. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
So section 2 provides definitions for the different terms and issues within the ordinance. Section 3 provides for a permit to be required that they would have to apply for and receive from the town, and penalties with that if they don't obtain the permit. For contact, emergency contact, non-emergency contact, that we have those people's names, contact information, establishes some response times, depending upon whether it's an emergency situation or non-emergency situation, where they have to provide response. Then Section 5 talks about compliance with law. So this covers a requirement that meet all federal, state, and local laws, as well as the uses that are allowed. We've had that in the current ordinances. I think expands upon that just a little bit, but again, lists those uses that you can't do in a short-term rental, and they have to comply with that. Section 6 requires notification to neighbors, and that be done before they start renting the short-term rental. Advertisement requirements, as somebody publicizes or advertises for the short-term rental, there's certain language that has to be included in that advertisement that highlights, again, the town's rules and regulations, so a person renting would know what those are. Section 8 requires posting on the property so that, again, you have that emergency contact information ready, immediately available there at the property. Section 9 requires some minimum insurance standards to be met. Section 10 requires background checks on those renting to make sure that they're not on a sex offender list. Let's skip Section 11 for just a minute and jump to 12. Section 12, permit suspension, so it allows opportunity for the town to suspend a permit if somebody's violating the requirements and conditions within the ordinance. Section 13 provides enhanced penalties, so in addition to other penalties in the town code, there's some enhanced penalties that can go with violation of the short-term rental. 14, appeals. If somebody believes that we have not applied the rules properly, they can appeal the decision on that. And then 15, judicial relief, and 16 is about severability. Going back to 11, this is a section that is based on the Paradise Valley ordinance. Everything else was what was in the model code that has been drafted by the attorneys and by the league. But in 11, it sets out some of the operating standards that, again, they've used in Paradise Valley. First one, owner representative must respond and abate issues in a timely manner. 2, owner to explain rules prior to occupancy. So it's not just that they're posted someplace, but the owner would actually explain the rules to somebody who's going to rent the home. 3, talks about trash and refuse that has to be collected, not placed out in public view. And 4, the notice requirements be placed, notice again regarding the rules, placed inside the front door and other doors into the backyard, so that again people are well aware of the rules that go with renting. Section B covers some health safety rules, requires smoke and carbon monoxide detection and notification system. 2, a fire extinguisher be installed and inspected. 3, fire safety and emergency evacuation map be provided. 4, that air filters get changed every 3 months. 5, at least one working landline to help provide for emergency contact. 6, the rental must be cleaned following CDC rules between rentals. And 7, a requirement for pest control services at least monthly. So as was stated before, this is a draft that we've put out for council and public comment and discussion. And based on what we learned this evening, we will take this, make any refinements, bring it back for actual consideration of the ordinance.
Thank you so much, John. We'll ask some questions up here, and we'll hear from the public. I wanted to ask Aaron, when this comes back, do we require a hearing, or this isn't a zoning change, is it?
Mayor and council, because this is not a change to our zoning code, this does not require a public hearing. It'll be a simple code amendment.
Okay. Well, we're talking about it now, and then when we bring it back, we'll talk about it.
Correct.
Vice Mayor.
A couple of quick questions, John. I didn't see anything addressing parking. And also then another question is, what are the requirements for keeping up the outside of the property, like landscaping?
Mayor, council, or vice mayor, parking maybe is an issue that could be included. I know it's been a challenge with some of the short-term rentals in town. We could consider adding that. It wasn't in either the model ordinance or the Pleasant Valley or the Paradise Valley ordinance, so we didn't include that at this point. With regard to the landscape maintenance, again, we have codes and ordinances that require maintenance of properties. We haven't seen a need to step that up to single out these properties differently than any other property. We think we're pretty effective with that. But again, if the council thinks that's important, we could look at it.
Mayor?
Yes, yes,
Mayor?
Councilman, go ahead. We hear you.
We have 1.5 code enforcement officers. I find myself wondering how we're going to enforce even half of these requirements. I just don't see how it can happen unless it's something I don't know.
Thank you. Anybody want to tackle that?
First of all, that we have now, thanks to the council, we were able to add another FTE or full-time equivalent. So now we have 2.5, John?
Right.
And then to the council member's point, a lot of this is administrative. We can do through the process, you know, through when we have the licensing and such that we do with this. However, you are correct, there will be impacts on complaints. And when complaints are received, they're either going to be handled one of two ways. One is if there's immediate impact, it's going to be MCSO, you know, with loudness or maybe parking in the street, or at least they'll do the police reports on that, and then that will be part of us on the administrative side trying to deal with them with notice of violation and working through that administratively. But there will be impacts for sure, and this is something we're going to have to evaluate. Cities that we've seen that have been very effective in other states, like in California, like Palm Springs, and also in the Denver area, that have been examples to the league that helped develop this. Some of the fees that actually have been brought in by those cities have actually paid for additional enforcement staff. So I'm not sure what we're going to be able to really charge, but I do believe that some of this can be offset by just the administration of the permit that was referenced earlier. So there will be impacts, and I think it's a wait and see, and we'll have to anticipate those impacts through our budget process.
Mayor, I think the requirements that have been, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I think the requirements that were shown are all very good, but I don't favor requirements that we know darn well cannot be enforced. For example, how are we going to know whether or not somebody replaces a fire extinguisher after 3 months? It just isn't going to happen. And so I think we have to look at this very realistically and see whether or not, see what can be enforced, what can't be enforced, how many code enforcement officers we're going to have, and so on.
Thank you. Our attorney, do you want to address it?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I was just going to address that really quick. I think that we should talk about that. I have a couple of subject areas specific that I'd like to get Council's input and direction on for when I redraft. That's going to be one of those, particularly regarding Section 11, whether we think that's desirable to adopt at all, let alone any individual sections. So if it's okay with the Mayor and Council, maybe we'll reserve that discussion for a little bit later after the Council is able to address their questions. Does that work? Okay, thanks.
So Grady, I was wondering, how many homes are we talking about roughly? Do we have any idea?
I've seen different numbers. I've seen anything between under 1,000. I've seen 350 to about 750 on short-term rentals. And we're supposed to be like the 5th highest number of short-term rentals in the state.
Yeah, I was going to say, Sharon, were you in on that? Or Peggy, yeah, that we saw that presentation at MAG, and I was kind of surprised to see Fountain Hills 5th down as far as having a lot of short-term rentals, and not, you know, a lot is a relative term, but for us it is. So percentage-wise, we were 5th in the state. We have Sedona, Flagstaff, Paradise Valley, Scottsdale. All of us have been working for years. We put together a video. We've been trying to really get the legislature, which have come around, obviously, with this particular statute. Again, Paradise Valley, they had put something in place that was challenged with that 1487 from a legislator who doesn't live here, and these items in Section 11 survived the 1487. And then just to reiterate, and then I'm sorry, the insurance aspect, that was in the state part, right? That was in the state statute part. Okay, great, thank you. Peggy, did you have something?
This is for discussion with Aaron. In Section 11, 2, it talks about giving information to booking guests. I think that needs to be clarified because the person who books can be different than the guest, so it's really talking about the guest, right?
Yes, I believe that's the intent of the language, but we'll look at how we could potentially clean it up. I agree.
Yeah, so I was wondering, I guess maybe Aaron, a couple things. I know you're going to get back to section 11, but so does that mean we're going to need access to inside the homes? I mean, I know that was an issue with the sober living and all that kind of stuff, so.
Well, maybe then this is a good time to raise that discussion. So that is part of the problem in my view. There are two issues, one perhaps more practically important than the other, with the components of the Paradise Valley ordinance that we've incorporated into section 11. I guess maybe 3. So the first issue that I see is the practical component of it, as Councilmember Magazine and Councilmember Charno alluded to. If there are provisions that we're simply not going to be able to get in there with any regularity to enforce, is it wise or reasonable for us to adopt those? That's a point for discussion. The second point is, the second and third point taken together, are those Paradise Valley provisions. Some of them survived scrutiny because the council made a record of why they were necessary. So, for example, one really good example is the landline. Apparently, I was talking to their town attorney out in Paradise Valley, and apparently it's notorious there for poor cell reception. And so a safety requirement was that there needs to be some ability to call 911 if and when an accident happens or an emergency happens on the premises. So, for example, I would be advising that we remove that landline provision as one example, because we haven't, unless we're willing to do an analysis and make that record, I don't know that we'd be able to garner the same support for adoption of that provision that Paradise Valley did, which helped them survive scrutiny under 1487 challenge.
Aaron, I get what you're saying about the reception part of it, and obviously we all know that everybody's carrying around phones, but could it possibly have something to do with maybe not to any one person?
It could. I suppose the flip side of it is typically the phone connected to the property who you'd want to be connected to is the owner, right? And typically the owner's not there because they're renting it out on a short-term basis. So, I mean, I think we get there with the emergency contact information provision, but that's me and kind of my legal recommendation. It's ultimately up to the council what it wishes to do.
Okay.
I was wondering too if there was any discussion at any level about, if we have so many of these rentals. I mean, obviously, a lot of them are smaller rentals. It might be a bedroom and a bathroom or a mother-in-law suite or what have you. And, we want to crack down on the party houses, of course, and that's usually where entire houses, larger homes are being rented out. And I'm just wondering if it's even practical or legal. I mean, can you differentiate square footage in terms of what's being rented out? And I mean, it just seems, a lot of these restrictions might be probably not burdensome, but I mean, really a pain to some of the smaller folks that are just renting smaller units, and that's not really the issue that we're going after. So I don't know if there's a way to differentiate that or if that's a good way to go or not, but I just anticipate some blowback from some folks who just have like a lower, bedroom unit down below that couples come in for, spring training for a week or what have you. I just was just wondering about that.
I'm wondering if Mayor and Council, in response to Councilmember Charno's question, wondering if the definition of short-term rental and vacation rental doesn't get at that, and maybe we just need to tinker with it a little bit to make it clear. It says that short-term rental and vacation rental are interchangeable for purposes of this article and mean any individually or collectively owned single-family or 1 to 4 family house or dwelling unit or any unit or group of units in a condominium or cooperative. So I'm wondering if that is sort of getting at that idea. Maybe to the extent it doesn't, it could be a subject for council discussion that we limit it to provisions that are rented out in their entirety, right? Or not provisions, excuse me, premises that are rented out in their entirety. Of course, the flip side is that means that every exception means that you just get more and more around the edges that are out of compliance and not addressing the problem. So it's ultimately up to, yeah, it's like, fair point, up to the council's discretion.
Are some of these, sorry, are some of these, like the fire extinguisher and the fire and safety emergency evacuation map, a lot of hotels and things have that in there. So some of these seem to be reflecting requirements that might be like in places where people stay over, accommodations for them for overnight, temporary, et cetera. But also, even though they might be really difficult to enforce, they seems to me like they are a guideline, you know, in the sense that you're using these more as a guideline or and just in case, or a safety net, so to speak, to have so many listed, or should we just take some of them out because they can't really be specifically applied as far as enforcing?
I mean, their mayor and Councilmember McMahon, I think that, I mean, they're drafted to be enforced. That's how they're presented. I'll just say my personal preference, as from a legal matter, not from a policy standpoint. As a legal matter, I prefer to just track the statute as it is. I don't know that it's necessary to go further than the statute, and I think that's the cleanest way to go about it. So if the council's amenable, I'm fine with removing Section 11. I have no reason to think that we have to have it or have to remove it. I simply think it would be clean if the council took it out, but that's ultimately up to you.
Could you put that Section 11 slide, I know there were two of them, but just that one might help a little bit too. Vice Mayor?
Two things. One, I think you leave it in there and you get what you can. But secondly, are these being rented out on an individual basis? Are there realtors in town that work with this? Have we gotten any input from that side? They might have some solutions or some ideas that could help us. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, and I don't know if Director Wesley has heard anything specifically. I do know that the primary groups that have been that were involved in the drafting of the ordinance itself, or excuse me, of the statute itself, it was industry drafted, right? They had collaboration with Airbnb, VRBO, and a couple of the other big ones, I think. So the legislative action was kind of already a compromise with the industry. So I'm not sure if I don't know if there is further comment, but I know that this is what's allowed under the provisions of a sort of pre-negotiated arrangement with the industry. I don't know if that answers your question, Vice Mayor. Yeah,
Thank
not
you.
really, but kind of, yeah.
Why don't we hear from the public if there's anybody here to, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Just real quick, so whenever this council or future council adopts there's no grandfathering then? Everyone has to come in and apply, or how is that going to work?
So that leads to a second area, Mayor, if I may, that the council should consider. I think it's relatively quick. Because there are fees and penalties associated with noncompliance, there wouldn't be any grandfathering. It will be once the ordinance comes into effect, compliance begins. But we are suggesting a delayed effective date on this for two reasons. One, under statute, we have to notice and publish any new fee that we adopt. We need at least 60 days for it to be posted before it takes effect. So it really, there's no sense in the ordinance going into effect before the fee goes into effect, right? And the second is, well, second and third, I suppose, is to give staff time to adjust to meet some of those staffing needs that we just identified earlier. And the third is, frankly, to give notice to the public, right? And to give notice to these property owners that this is something that's going to be going into effect. So I believe Director Pock and I discussed, and we can toy with this date, but to give us enough time to notice and publish and for staff to get their ducks in a row to make sure that we have a proper registration in order. I believe we discussed a February 1st, 2023 effective date. That's what we're going to propose. Staff will be proposing to the council.
Are those fees capped, or can we do what we want in that area?
The fees are capped statutorily, Vice Mayor.
Linda, do we have speaker cards for this?
Yes, Mayor, we do. We have two. The first one is Jeff Esposito. He also sent an email with information for you to read, and now he's going to present for us as well. He has a prop.
Okay. Madam Mayor and council members, good evening. My name is Jeff Esposito. I am the president of the Neighborhood Property Owners Association, and I am a Fountain Hills resident. For those of you not familiar with the Neighborhood Property Owners Association, commonly known as the NPOA, we are an organization set up by homeowners 30 years ago to uphold the neighborhood standards established by McCullough Properties and MCO, the master developers of Fountain Hills. Our governing document is the NPOA Declaration of Reservations, and it was established to enhance the aesthetic values of the community and to promote public health, safety, and the general welfare of the community. The Declaration of Reservations is a deed restriction that runs with the land and is very much like an HOA. This deed restriction affects almost 4,500 homes in Fountain Hills. For those in the back here, that's all the green here, and for those in the front, all of those green is NPOA jurisdiction. So now, given that background, please know that the NPOA Board of Directors urges the council to approve the short-term rental ordinance as proposed. And that's the online version that I was reading through that was an amendment or an attachment. We believe it to be as strong and restrictive as legally possible. We have dealt with and we continue to deal with short-term rental complaints on a regular basis. They don't have anybody to turn to but us. And in response to our member request, the NPOA polled its residential plat delegates, and the results overwhelmingly indicated a desire to regulate short-term rentals as stringently as possible. As a result, the NPOA has established a nuisance complaint resolution to deal with neighborhood disruptions. So, in conjunction with our existing nuisance complaint resolution, a strong town code would provide for the approximately 4,500 homes that we share jurisdiction with, one of the strongest neighborhood protection environments in the metro area. So as I mentioned in my letter, in the interest of time, I wanted to focus just on the ordinance, but I do want to reiterate, because it kind of came up a little bit before, that enforcement of an ordinance is just as important. You've got to make the investments in that area as well. So we hope you take our recommendations into consideration, and we, the NPOA, are available for further discussions if needed. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We appreciate that. And believe me, we hear about it too, because it's just been a long, hard slog since, what was it, 2016? Yeah. It's something that we really would like to make happen. So, and this is the first. There's been some other bills that came through that helped a bit, but this is one with real teeth. So, thank you.
Yeah, there were some things in that attachment that weren't mentioned here relative to parties and obnoxious sounds and that kinds of thing, which I think is what we can base that disruption on. So.
Well, and that was exactly right, because we found ourselves trying to figure out what we could do when it came to noise or parking, reckless driving, litter, just like everywhere around it. So, so this will be very helpful. Thanks for your input.
Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is the Honorable Enrique Melendez.
Good evening, Mayor Dickey, council members, town manager, and staff. I'm here tonight to present to you an issue that has become prevalent throughout not only our great state of Arizona, but throughout all western states. And I'm specifically talking about the VRBO segment of property that, in my opinion, needs to be reviewed and carefully analyzed. I have been a resident of Fountain Hills for 30 years, served as a council member just like you for 3 years, and now we have a new element that has come about in the VRBO. We have, in my own neighborhood, 3 houses. I'm surrounded by 3 properties, VRBO, and I'm not going to sell, period. But I think that the council needs to take a good look at some of the restrictions and some of the policies that cities have put together. I'm referring to Paradise Valley, the city of Anaheim in California. And I believe we need to review and have a provision for these homeowners who have owned their home, and just like the First Amendment, they're able to do whatever they want with their property according to the law and the ordinances that you behind the days put together. I believe that some of these rentals are getting out of hand in terms of noise. And we have, as Mayor Cotello articulated, about 3 weeks ago, we have ordinances in place, but they need to be enforced. We can't be calling the sheriff's department all the time, but I believe if we develop a fine system, a penalty system, if you would, for some of these homeowners that are taking advantage and lack of respect to their own neighbors. Let me give you an example. There's a house very close by to me, charges $3,800 a day for the rental, $1,000 for a cleaning deposit, and $75 a day for the upkeep of the spa. My question to you, Council, is are we deriving any money from these rentals? And what type of money is scheduled to be spent by the owners to get a permit? I understand is very low, $50, am I right, to start a business? And I believe that if someone's charging $3,800 a night, the application fee should be a minimum of $10,000 just to do that. Because in a month, they can develop a lot of income. And what are we in the town deriving from that? That's one example. Another example that just came about next door to me, a couple moved in, bought a home, and in 4 months, they decided to put it up as a VRBO. However, they were very, very cautious on the way they did it. They said, no children under 12, no dogs, no big parties, and so forth. And I think that we have enough meat in some of the ordinances from Paradise Valley, from the city of Anaheim, and other cities, that we can't put restrictions, okay, on these property owners, because they lack my favorite word that you heard me say for 30 years, respect. And so I'm appealing to you, Council, and to the town manager, who, by the way, is the very best one. I work with 5 town managers, and you, Mr. Miller, seems to be taking things in accordance to what's best for the community. Excuse my voice, but I want to thank you, Council, but we need to have a definition of what restrictions we can put on these homeowners. they can't go wild. They can't. I travel and I see mayors from all over the state of Arizona in my diplomatic role, and we're looked upon, Fountain Hills is a place where you can go and get a VRBO and make a lot of money. So I want to end it by saying, please consider developing strict regulations and that conform with the previous codes Mayor Cotello has proclaimed in the last meeting. And so I'm asking you for your support. We need to keep Fountain Hills as good as it gets, and happy to assist you in any way that I can.
Thank you, Enrique. We really appreciate your coming in. Any questions for Mr. Melendez? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Any further comments or questions? Yes, Grady.
I just had one thing. So the only thing that the town really gets at this point, besides a lot of headaches, is they do pay the short-term sales tax, which is about 2.9%. Right now, long-term rentals that I believe are 3 months or longer are like at 1.6%. So it is, but that's all we're getting, and there's probably a lot more impacts on the whole community versus what we're actually getting.
And probably some that we're not getting any. I hate to say, but, all right. So do you have what you need? I think we want to go for what's there. Maybe, what was the one item that you said?
Landline?
Yeah.
Was that what-
I mean, that's not
Yeah.
that a big a deal. If you, I mean, I don't mind just leaving everything the way it is and seeing what happens. Grady?
There was some discussion about parking, and I'm not really sure where the council's direction was on that. If you're wanting us, we do have a current ordinance now that was really designed to address another kind of set of parking issues. We can probably, when we come back, we can probably make some suggestions to you on like maybe a limit on the number of cars, and maybe it's like the cars are based on what they have to park on their property, and then a limit to what they can actually have on the street. Would that be something you'd be amenable to?
I think so. My only caution with that is when someone has a party, or, you know, I mean, I know that a lot of this has to be evenly enforced, and so you might have to have something in there that has to do with regularity.
Right, okay. Well, that's good input. Thank you.
Also, would that apply to HOA? Or do they have their own set of rules?
Yeah, HOAs would have their own set of
Right, that's
rules,
what I
Mayor and
thought.
Council. Yep. But I think, at least from my perspective, Mayor and Council, I think we have what we need to bring a revised version back. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Our next item is about the sanitary district well. Grady, do you want to introduce that?
Yes, so we also have an item before you. You probably recall the 2 restrooms that we had that were installed at the Fountain Park, thanks to a partnership with the sanitary district. That part of those restrooms are these control rooms that help them monitor the sanitary district wells. We're going to go ahead and call up Dana Tromke, who is the general manager, executive director of the sanitary district, and she has a presentation she'll be giving to you for this particular well, which I believe is well number 1.
Yes.
So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Tromke.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for the promotion. My actual title is district manager, but executive director sounds nice, so I'll take that for the moment. Thank you very much for letting me come and speak. I would like to present a project that we would like to move forward with, but before I do that, I need to take a step back and explain why and the need for it. So just to remind you, the Fountain Hills Sanitary District collects all of the wastewater in town and treats it, and then disposes of the treated water. And the town of Fountain Hills, with our population of about 24,000 or more, creates 2 million gallons of wastewater a day. Last year in 2021, we had 710 million gallons of wastewater to treat and then somehow use or dispose of. And the figures here show that all of this wastewater comes from every individual home or business that's in town is then connected to the sewer system, and we have a huge network of sewer systems, over 210 miles of gravity sewer pipes that all lead to a wastewater treatment plant. Our main plant's located there at Saguaro and Pepperwood, and we do most of our primary, secondary, and tertiary treatment at the wastewater treatment plant. At that point, it is technically classified as Class A+ reclaimed water by the state of Arizona, but the district goes a step further and sends it to a second treatment facility called our Advanced Water Treatment Facility, where it undergoes membrane filtration. So 100% of the wastewater in town is collected, treated, and converted to recycled water. And that is because another unique property of the town of Fountain Hills in this area is that we have no legal discharge of our water, treated wastewater. Most other cities and municipalities treat their water to state standards and then can dispose of it in a wash or a river. The town and our district here, the sanitary district, does not have that legal discharge because any wash within our service area would go to one of two Native American tribal communities, and the tribal communities have never allowed a discharge where wastewater would flow across tribal lands. So 100% of that recycled water has to be used and dealt with within our boundaries. We do an excellent job of that and have been doing very well since its formation. The recycled water that we generate, about 15% of it we use internally for some of our own processes for the treatment process. 70% of it then gets distributed to 3 different golf courses in town. And then another the final 15% of it gets distributed and used for irrigation at 3 town parks. And it does go to fill Fountain Lake. Now, one of the things that you may not realize, though, is that the recycled water supply and demand do not align. The blue line in this chart represents the amount of wastewater that comes in every single month. We get a little peak in February or March when all of the festivities and snowbirds and spring training and everything, and then a little dip in the summer when everyone goes on vacation to get out of the heat. But the purple line represents how much reclaimed water is needed for irrigation. You can imagine in July and June when it's 110 degrees, every bit of turf is screaming for water. We have quite an abundance of water in the spring. Rain events such as these last rainy days that we've had recently, and then usually we get some winter storms somewhere around February. And the cooler temperatures mean that the turf does not need nearly as much water. And so we have an abundance of water in the winter and then not enough water in the summer. So all of that excess water is stored in underground wells. For all the excess water in the winter is stored in the underground wells in the summer. In the year 2000, 3 wells were constructed in underground vaults around Fountain Lake. You can see them in the first picture. They are buried in great big concrete basins below ground. Half of it is a well, and a well is usually a 12-inch diameter pipe that goes about 700 feet down to the aquifer. And the other half of it is a control facility, and you'll see a picture there on the right. One of the things to note in this picture on the right is there's a lot of rust and contamination. Those facilities have reached the end of their useful life, and they need to be replaced. You'll also note that one of our operators has his hand on a high voltage power panel and the other hand on a water pipe. So if either one of those items burst or require maintenance, it's technically a confined space, and electrical codes would no longer allow you to build such a facility to have such high voltage electrical items with no room for clearance for safety. In 2019, since those facilities, all 3 of those well vaults have really have just deteriorated to such a condition that they had to be replaced. And in 2019, the district replaced 2 of them with above-ground control rooms, and they were cleverly disguised by including public restrooms to them. You'll see the facility in the picture on the right. That actually is a ramada that matches the architecture of the ramadas in the park, and then behind it is a building that's divided into thirds. A third of it is a well control room, a third of it is the men's restroom, and a third of it is the women's restroom. From everything that we've heard, these facilities have been wildly successful. They've been very much appreciated. All of the walkers and some of the park events that happen, community events that happen in the park on weekends, appreciate that there were 2 extra restrooms available in that whole 64-acre park. What's important to the sanitary district is that you note the pictures on the right. Now my crews can safely get in and maintain these facilities. We have the proper amount of clearance that's required by all electrical codes, and it will allow us to better maintain and operate our facilities for a much longer period of time than having to go down kind of into a buried little vault in the ground. So I mentioned 2 of the wells were addressed with this one. There's now the 3rd and final well that is located in the park, also needs an above-ground control room. The difficulty with this one is that it is in a more prominent area. It's near the area that's called the Great Lawn, and it is right along a flood channel, the 100-year flood channel that goes through the middle. You'll see the well is on the right, and then the electric service that feeds it is on the left along Saguaro. So we worked and had many, many conversations with town staff, with community services and Parks Rec, and town manager Miller, and tried to evaluate 2, 3, or 4 different locations for where this would could best meet our needs, and that it wasn't going to provide a distraction or a nuisance in the park, and where is it that we could actually add an amenity or add a feature to the park. So the proposal is to put a facility down where the presidential statutes now lie, or stand. You'll see, sorry, stand. Some of them are sitting, some are standing. And it would be to tuck them down, if you kind of look at this aerial, tuck it down as far south as we can, kind of up against the property there. That's the Fountainside Plaza at the bottom. And tuck it down as far as we can. There is a 60-inch drainage pipe that goes through there that we can't build on top of. So this would be, let me get to the architectural renderings. So this is a top view of what the proposal would be. It's going to have a ramada and a kind of a covered porch area, very much similar to the other facilities. And then the back half of it, instead of needing as much of a building, where before it was a third for the well control room and then 2/3 for restrooms, it would just be a smaller footprint and just be the well control room. This is an area of the park where an additional restroom is not desired. But it does go right now, currently, where the presidential statutes stand. This proposal would pull the sidewalk off and kind of meander it in front of it instead of keeping it along the curb, and that's so our crews can access the building in the back with their vehicle and never have to cross pedestrian traffic. That was one of the goals that we accomplished at the northern bathroom, which we refer to as Well 4, is by moving the restroom in front of it, our crews can get to the back and we don't have to cross with any trucks or traffic. We don't have to cross the pedestrian traffic. So the front side of this is, again, just another ramada to match the architecture that's already within the park. This would mean that the statutes would need to be replaced, but we could put them in a thoughtful, kind of more interactive alignment. There would be an opportunity to put a water fountain underneath. Seems to be the dog watering bowl is also a big hit every time there's a water fountain. And there was the request that the sidewalk could go through, and for people who wanted to stop in the shade, and then to also go around, because there's quite a bit of power walkers that don't want to kind of hit a traffic jam with those who like to stand and linger around and look at things. Inside the ramada, in addition to providing a drinking fountain, shade, a place to sit down, it might become more of a focal point or a viewpoint where you stop to look at the fountain. I know along Saguaro there's just that big sidewalk, and so some people don't quite know where to go to take their best picture of the fountain. Inside, posters or any sort of other communication can be put up, working with Parks and Community Services staff. This is just another shot of it, kind of showing the arrangement of how some of the statutes could be laid out. On the southern side of it, one of the comments that we did get on the restroom buildings and the other well buildings is that there's an electrical panel on the outside that's kind of an eyesore. On this one, we'd like to go a step further and perhaps hide it a little better, maybe take some some examples of some of the facilities that are along Avenue of the Fountain and mimic some of that architecture to kind of hide the electrical panel a little bit better. And this is just another view from another vantage. The district will work with the town staff and the Fountain Hills Civic Cultural Association and the Public Art Committee to relocate the presidential statues. The district will, this is being proposed as a district project. The district will pay for it, and we would want to get community buy-in for where the statues get placed. Our understanding is that the placement of the statues right now is not ideal, or maybe some of it kind of happened a little bit organic over time, and they weren't necessarily laid out specifically all at once. And so this would give the opportunity to kind of master plan it a little bit better, and that the Public Arts Commission could have a say in how to lay those out. So the goal of the project is to benefit both the district and the park users. First and foremost, it provides a needed above-ground control room for that critical piece of our reclaimed water management system. Again, we could not replace the vault with another buried vault in that capacity because you saw the tightness and the unsafe work conditions for operators. It would also allow us to access the facility without crossing pedestrian traffic. It could provide a bit of needed shade and a rest spot along that western walking path. It would provide a drinking fountain and a designated view spot and a better arrangement of the presidential statues. So with that, if you have any questions, I would be happy.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a couple questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What is the cost to the town, or is the sanitary district paying for all of it?
The sanitary district would pay for this.
100%?
Yes, on
Okay.
this one.
What do you think the time frame is on it? And if you're moving the well, you're going to be digging it up, right? So are you going to be reseeding and redoing the landscape and the lawn, et cetera?
Yes, I can't move the well. The well itself is a casing that's been drilled 700
well,
feet down.
I meant
So the
that.
big vault that is
Right.
on top of it will get pulled out and reduced to something a quarter or a third of the size. So there still will be one. And yes, we will regrade and reseed. Much like we did at the other two facilities, it just got, where the well is itself, that box got smaller, and then turf was put in, and the irrigation system was put in to maintain
If this
that.
is approved, when do you anticipate starting the project, and how long do you think it's going to take?
As far as construction, I would hope in the less than 9 months timeframe as far as construction. I would like to wrap up design by early part of next year, January, February, and get it out to a contractor to build. In some of the discussions with town staff, the importance of scheduling this, so I understand that work really needs to happen over the summer. We don't intend to be in construction in the middle of Thanksgiving and the Great Fair and all of the Oktoberfest and all of the big events that occur in that area. So we would be trying to do the construction in the summer months when it would have the least impact on park
Also,
events.
clarification, please, on the sidewalk. You know, the current sidewalk that goes along the road there, you're going to do away with that one and just have it be the circular path?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Do we have any speaker cards on this item?
No, Mayor, we do not.
Any other comments or questions, anybody? Mike?
No, I like it. I think it's great. I think it looks good. I think it serves a great purpose for our park and our pedestrians and the walkers there, and helps you guys, so it's another win-win.
Agree, and safety is the issue here, and happy to see you be able to make that step. Any other, no? Can I get a motion, please?
I'll make it. Move to approve the sanitary district ASR well number 1 location at Fountain Park and direct the town manager to execute all applicable contracts and agreements.
Second. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks. Thanks for the info.
Thank you.
So polite here. Our next item is artistic land management landscaping.
Yes, on this particular item, our park superintendent, Kevin Snipes, will be giving the staff report on. With that, Mr. Snipes?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. This is a amendment to our existing contract with Artistic Land Management. They do all of our maintenance in our parks and along our streets and washes, and they do a lot of stuff for us. The one thing that we didn't account for when we were doing this contract kind of in a speed fashion when we let go our old landscape company was if we wanted to add extra, if we had projects that we needed to get done, or if we had storm damage and we needed their help. This will allow us to have some extra funding available when and if we need them. We have some landscape projects where we're going to add some plants, and using them for that isn't allocated in that maintenance side of the existing contract. So that's why we're asking for an additional $50,000 to add to the contract.
Anybody have any questions or comments for Kevin? Mike?
No, I know it's been night and day since we let go of that other firm and what these guys are doing. I mean, I was just going down Golden Eagle Boulevard earlier today, and it's just, they're just doing a bang-up job as far as I can see. So I don't know, unless there's any other comment, I'll make a motion.
Just make sure there's no cards. Any speaker cards? No.
There are no speaker cards. Thank you,
There you
Mayor.
I'll move to approve Artistic Land Management Landscaping, Inc. Contract Amendment 2022-057.1.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
Kevin. All right. Next, we're on to auto fleet. Grady?
Yes, Justin Weldy, our Public Works Director, will be giving the staff report on this particular cooperative purchasing agreement. Mr. Weldy?
Thank you, sir. Madam Mayor, council members, this agreement that we're asking for consideration on tonight is part of our ongoing and multi-year vehicle replacement. The exception is one of the vehicles that we are requesting by default is actually a deferral from many, many years ago when the street department was about 13 strong and then reduced to 4. There were several vehicles in use at that time that were capable of carrying up to 6 employees. As their life or term of use came to end, we opted not to replace them and instead came back to the council and asked to use some of that funding to purchase some additional needed equipment. And since that time, we have managed to put money aside for this and also ask for a budget supplement in last year. So one of the vehicles is a replacement for the engineering department, and the second one is a new vehicle for the street superintendent, and the latter is the one that we have put some savings aside for and asked for a budget supplement. If there are any questions, I will do my best to answer them.
Does council have any questions? No? Do we have any speaker cards?
No, Mayor, we do not.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, if there's no discussion, would someone like to make a motion?
I will. Move to approve cooperative purchasing agreement 2023-046 between the Town of Fountain Hills, National Auto Fleet Group in the amount of $75,280 for the purchase of 2 needed vehicles.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Justin.
You're welcome.
Our next item is something we've seen before. It's about the property on Kings Tree. Grady?
Yes, our senior planner, Farhad Tabaselli, is going to give a presentation on this request for an extension.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, good evening. I'll keep my presentation brief and allow some more time for discussion or questions, but in summary, this is a special use permit extension request for a residential use within a common commercial zoning district. This originally came before you in September of last year. The request was for a half-acre, pertaining to a half-acre property at the northwest corner of King Street in Saguaro Boulevard. The purpose of the special use permit was to allow 8 live-work units and 4 residential units in a commercial lot. Zoning ordinance requires any overnight uses, or particularly residential uses within a commercial district, requires a special use permit prior to any site plan review and approval. And really to summarize kind of chronologically why we're before you today, the applicant required that they obtain a building permit within 6 months of approval of a special use permit. The zoning ordinance does allow the applicant to make a request for an extension. Now, the original SUP was approved in September, as I mentioned, of last year. Applicant came in with a request for an extension on March 21st. The extension was approved by council. The applicant has now filed for another, a second 6-month extension request. And in the meanwhile, the applicant has also submitted a site plan to staff for review against the zoning standards and also the engineering standards as well. Staff is recommending approval. Staff believes there is a good faith effort on the applicant's part in moving forward with this project. However, we're still working on with the applicant in the effort to approve a site plan that is compliant and follows all the design review standards of the zoning ordinance. With that, I'll conclude my presentation. Allow time for some questions, either for myself or the applicant.
When was that site plan submitted?
I believe, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Friedel, I don't specifically remember, but I believe it was submitted, and allow the applicant to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was submitted after the 6-month extension request.
Do you know why he's having to
I'll
request this time and time again, and will this be his last time, do you think?
Well, as I mentioned, staff is working with the applicant closely to make sure that does happen within the next 6 months.
Any speaker cards on this item?
Mayor, no, we have no speaker cards.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Can I get a motion, please?
Move to approve the request for a 6-month extension to the special use permit to allow a maximum of 12 dwelling units at 17134 East King Street Boulevard.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Our next item is related to our presentation that we had earlier, and it is a request to consider a contract for pavement assessment. Grady?
Yes, I'm just going to have Mr. Weldy, again, give a presentation on this or a staff report on this particular contract that we're seeking council consideration and approval. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Weldy.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, council member, as you are all well aware, we are working to do the best we can to figure out a long-term pavement management plan for this community. Part of that plan over the last, well, almost 15 years has to have an assessment done of our streets and determine the condition of those streets through that assessment. Using those analysis, especially the last one that we had done in 2018, we have been able to utilize the limited funding that we've had to make substantial improvements on the roads that can be saved. As you saw tonight in a presentation from Mr. Butler and his dedicated group of volunteers, there are substantial changes in the local roads, and by far the local roads are one of our largest segments of roads. This new one is a continuation of that. Once the data and information is gathered, the team that is selected from this group will work with town staff and that group of volunteers moving forward on the future to make sure that the funding that we have is placed in the right location at the right time based on recommendations from this elected body and a team of professionals to accomplish that goal. With that, if you have any questions related to this agreement, I'll do my best to answer them.
So does the timing of this tie in with the work being done by the committee then and their final report, or?
Yes, and that's why it was mentioned this spring, because we believe that they'll have everything completed. They're going to, if you recall, IMS, the firm that we used previously, had a specially equipped vehicle that drove over all the streets in town, and through a laser process, we're able to identify the condition and gave a letter grading to all of our streets. That's going to happen again, and based on their findings and conclusions, then that's going to influence the committee and developing what they need to for their report and final report to the council. They'll also be able to do what-if scenarios based on prioritization of the streets and what we do in what order. So it's very critical to have this contract in place.
Do we have any speaker cards?
No, Mayor, we do not.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions? Yes, Vice Mayor.
Do you want a motion?
Oh, sure.
Move to approve professional services agreement 2023-047 between the town and Roadway Asset Services LLC for pavement condition and evaluation related services in the amount of $59,997.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Justin, very much.
You're welcome.
All right, we're moving in the right direction there. Our last item is to approve a settlement agreement. I will ask Aaron, would you like to present on this, please?
Certainly, Mayor. Mayor and Council, I have no formal presentation tonight. As the Council is aware, over the last several weeks, we have been engaged in negotiations with the plaintiffs in Shea versus Town of Fountain Hills, in that case in Superior Court, to try to reach a resolution of the litigation that was instituted in that case. We've worked together to resolve some of the differences between the parties. The end result of which will be a dismissal of all claims, mutually agreed dismissal of all claims and a release. Unless there are questions from the council, I believe that I've provided legal advice as well as direction as to the contract in executive session. I'm happy to answer questions. Otherwise, staff is recommending approval tonight.
Thank you, Aaron. Are there any questions from council or comments? Do we have speaker cards on this item?
They're not in person, but they just wanted to ask a question. Liz Gildersleeve wants to know, what are the legal fees and legal costs of the town as a result of this lawsuit?
Okay, thank you. Obviously, we're not prepared to respond to that at this point, but we can look that up. So if council has no comment or any questions about this, and there are no further speaker cards, can I get a motion?
Move to approve the settlement agreement and release between the Town of Fountain Hills and N. Shea Group LLC and Park Place Properties LLC, and adopt Resolution 2022-45 approving a First Amendment to the development agreement between the Town of Fountain Hills and N. Shea Group LLC and Park Place Properties LLC.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. That passes. Our last item is our discussion, direction to town manager. Anything for the good of the order, future agendas? No? All right, we are adjourned.